Hi, everybody. I'm John Lux. I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida, and welcome to Film Florida Friday. Film Florida Fridays are interactive conversations about current topics, initiatives, relationship building in Florida's film, television, commercial, and digital media production industry. Today, we're talking about production accounting. In a moment, our guests will introduce themselves, then I'll ask some questions to get things going. During that time, we're going to ask that everybody keep their microphones on mute to avoid background noise. After we've got through the initial questions, we'll open it up to the audience for questions and conversation. At that time, we're going to ask that everybody use the hand raising function, which is down on your lower bar, so we can call on you. We want this to be conversational and interactive, but we also don't want a bunch of people talking at the same time. We're going to ask that everybody keep their questions and comments brief in the interest of time and out of fairness to others that want the opportunity. As always, Film Florida Fridays are free, but if you like what you hear, please consider donating $20.22 for our 2022 fundraising campaign. That donation link will be posted in the chat box throughout the discussion, or you can find it on our website. And with that, I want to introduce our guests. We have Andy Wheeler, Mary Sunshine, and Amit Jagwani. They're better at giving their bios and backgrounds, so I'm going to throw it to them and let each of them introduce themselves. Andy, you go ahead first.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Andy Wheeler. I'm a production accountant. I'm, by IMDb standards, I'm known for Eternal Sunshine and Revolutionary Road and by Blueberry Nights, 25th Hour, but I've also done television. I did Ugly Betty, Girls, The Last OG, and a whole series of other name brand shows. Only Murders in the Building is currently airing. I have been a CFO of a management company and commercial production company. And I launched an online network called The Online Network with a rehash of the soap operas One Life to Live and All My Children as a test to see how television could move from television onto online.
Very good. Mary, how about you?
Well, I'm just an old-fashioned accountant. I've been doing this for 28 years. I started in Florida, but soon moved to New York City in the 90s and was active in the independent film world. And then I moved to LA and got more involved with the big studio films. So I've traveled all throughout the US and many overseas foreign shows, which are super fun. And I've worked with, some of the best directors out there, Coen Brothers, Paul Thomas Anderson, Alejandro Gonzalez, Iñárritu, a bunch of them. So Academy Award winning shows, Argo, a few other things. Anyway, I've just really been lucky to be in this business and super enjoyed it. So we'll tell you more about it.
Excellent. And Amit, how about you?
Hi, my name is Amit Jagwani. I'm a former production accountant, mediocre at best, but I was one for a period of time. And I actually work with Andy and some other people on this call on providing services for production accountants by way of production accounting software, payroll, et cetera, that are all requisite necessary for being a production accountant, or having the tools you need to get the work done. I actually am now back in Miami. I used to live in LA and New York, so did the whole circle as well, and did some work in Vancouver and Toronto as well. So been around the North American circuit more than international, did a few international shows, but more on the audit side for the studios to make sure that their productions were within budget and on track as far as production schedules go. Beyond that, we'll get into more of this through the conversation.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us. Andy, let's start with you with just, let's ground everybody in some context. What exactly is a production accountant?
Well, it's the most boring job in the most exciting industry.
It's not boring, Andy.
So the production accountant is in charge of all of the business functions. We're the point person for labor relations, legal, tax, compliance, incentive, and most importantly, we're in charge of accounting operations.
And how did you find your way into the production specific side of the accounting?
Well, I also have been in the industry for a very long time. I started in 1991 and I worked, I got a job at America's Most Wanted when Fox was first expanding. And I worked as an assistant accountant at America's Most Wanted in Washington, D.C. And then I came through a temp agency. I don't have a college degree. And I learned the bookkeeping portion of it, which is a big part of the job when you're an assistant. And I kind of grew a career from there. I learned to be a producer. I produced gobs of commercials and America's Most Wanteds and mostly scripted, some unscripted, and moved to New York and continued my path as a production accountant. And I'm kind of an exploratory person. I like to do all kinds of technology things and new exciting things in the industry. So I just did whatever felt right.
Mary, how about you? What's your path to production accounting?
Well, started out here in Florida. I had no idea what the job even was, but I had a friend who was a production manager in Miami. And he just made an offhand comment to me one day, like, hey, you'd be a good movie accountant. I'm like, movie accountant? Ding, ding, what's that? So anyway, I found out, I introduced myself to the film commissioner in Palm Beach County, and I happened to talk my way onto a job on Bad Boys when that was shooting in Miami in 1994. So I got a job on that. And for some reason, a couple little independent films came to Palm Beach County right as I was getting in the business, and little $1 million movies. And when they showed up, the film commissioner said, oh yeah, we have an accountant here. I was like, okay, I'll do it. So anyway, I just started, got thrown into it and never looked back.
And Ahmed, how about you? What's your path?
I actually did the whole formal education MBA situation, didn't know what production accounting was at all. Worked for the Big Four in Miami, was with KPMG for a while, Ernst Young, and wanted to be in movies and film and TV. So moved out to LA, was an aspiring actor. That part didn't work out so well. And then actually ended up just kind of chasing down the path. I was a production auditor for Fox for a number of years. And then just like many people actually who get into this space, because it's really difficult. It's not, there's no formal path. It was somebody that I met along the way was like, you should try this. And so I left production accounting. I left the audit side of the business in the formal studio setting and went to become a second assistant on some J.J. Abrams shows for Warner Brothers produced, but NBC aired for a few years, and then just kind of stayed in and around the space. And then now on the service side of the game, I'm still kind of close and attached to it, but I don't have the same hours.
Well, on the service side of things, you know, you mentioned that your company that you work for is Extreme Reach, and you guys have offices in Boca Raton. Tell us a little bit about the company overall.
Yeah, sure. So Extreme Reach is the division that I represent specifically is a production payroll service. So if you're an accountant on any show, really globally, one of the aspects you have to worry about, as Andy and everybody mentioned, was the fact that you have to, in essence, track your cost, bookkeeping aspects. So companies like mine specifically, we produce and create a production accounting software that allow for the reporting, the tax incentive tracking, all the cost allocation and payment associated with a project, so that you can report back to the studio, your investor, whomever it may be, to make sure things are on track, and also just manage your project. So we provide the software to facilitate that, along with the payroll aspects, especially when you're working with various unions in various locales, and with tax incentives right now, with various incentive receipts coming in from the states. All that tracking becomes very, very necessary. So our office in Boca is actually, we do payroll out of that office as well. And then another type of business is a business called Slate, in essence, the IMDb for commercials. And we do a lot of work in the commercial space, not just on the payroll side, but on the commercial distribution side, on the subscription side, on the management side, on the clearance side, everything in between. And so we help facilitate and work with everybody, work with the Andys and the Marys of the world to make sure they get what they need when it comes to production.
And Mary, talk a little bit about, we have accountants and then we have production accountants. What's the difference between a regular accountant and a production accountant? Is it just the knowledge that from the production world?
Well, I think there's more difference. We do a lot of the same basic things like the bookkeeping stuff, and there's a trial balance and general ledgers, but we're doing cost accounting for a project. And so specific, we have to know so much about the movie making process. And, you know, in our jobs, I feel, I can't speak to being what other accountants do in the real world, but we are so involved with the whole crew. You know, we're part of a big thing, and we're working with the crew members, the producer, the studios, and you know, I feel like we're more of a part of a film crew rather than just somebody sitting in a room and doing accounting. And plus, we have these amazing opportunities to travel and you know, like it's like running off with the circus or something. It's like totally different. So I just think it's just the general, you know, how our jobs are done is different,
That
even
makes
though we
sense.
are doing some of the same kind of things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, Andy, when I talk to some producers, and we talk about their projects, and they say they don't have a production accountant. They say they're just handling it themselves. You know, is that a mistake? Why is that a mistake if it is?
Well, I think it depends on the kinds of projects they're doing. So if you own a boutique production company and you are doing commercials and you want to save the money and submit to the commercial companies your final books, I mean, it's not a considerable amount of work. But if you're interested in growing your company and working with the studios and building out those relationships, scripted or unscripted, the production accountant becomes a main tool to help you network through. They become a tool to help communicate to the studio. All of the studios have a lot of compliance now. If you work with a Netflix, say, who's, you know, Netflix and Disney are expanding like they're unscripted, right? So when you're working with them, their reporting is twice a week. You have phone calls with them. Once a week, you send them financial reporting. They review every single cost and they question everything. For $1 million project, you know, to do a stand-up, to video a stand-up comedian. And so you're just a little boutique production company who's trying to make money off from that. And you're being sent to the wolves without some support by having a production accountant with you.
So Mary, is it budget threshold that requires when a production accountant, or is it type of project, or is it the client that you have,
Well,
or is
you
it kind of
know,
all the same, all of the above?
well, for me, I'm from the feature film world, and that's all I've ever done. But I would think anytime you have crew to pay, you know, obviously bills to pay, definitely cast. I mean, I wouldn't think a producer or UPM would know all the rules and how to pay these people. I mean, I know, like, you know, Sling Blade and some of these littler movies, they were like $1 million movies, and I was the accountant. So I just feel like it's totally necessary.
Yeah. Now, Andy, when should a production accountant be brought in on a project? Is there a specific time when it's the most appropriate? Because obviously a production is going to say, the longer I have the production accountant on, the more I have to pay them. So what's the shortest period of time? But what is the right amount of time to bring that person on?
They should hire some. Thank you. Sorry about stepping on you. They should have somebody come in and consult with them early on, as early on as they can. So even if it's to do a budget, to talk with them about the you know, the different options for unionization, to talk with them about scheduling options, to help make, you know, relationship connections. I think it's really important that the sooner, even if you have, like, I have this idea and I want to make this unscripted show, how do I pitch this to somebody? No studio is even going to look at it without a budget. So, you know, you have to have a plan that includes a financial plan.
Can I say something?
Please.
I'm currently wrapping up Murder Mystery 2, Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston for Netflix. And I started on this project last February, over a year ago, and I was budgeting it. And, you know, the budgets I was doing is like, okay, first we're going to go to Paris and Mauritius. Like, oh no, we're changing our mind. Now we're going to go to Paris and the Bahamas. Oh no, now we need a budget for Paris and Hawaii. So the accountant's really invaluable at the beginning, even figuring out where they're going to go. How much is this going to
Right.
cost? And then, we have to get it all set up. And so generally for these big feature films, I'm on probably about 4 or 5 months before they start shooting. And I'm
Interesting.
still on. And we just finished shooting 2 weeks ago. I was in Paris. I just got home. So I'm
We're
going to wrap
jealous.
home.
So I also think it's important that, a production accountant, like Mary or myself, have a lot of experience around the world shooting. So, or doing budgets for around the world. So you understand the different incentive plans that are in different states, and you're able to advise of some of the pitfalls of those states. Like some states are not legit about their incentives. They pretend to have an incentive, but they never actually pay it out. Only a production accountant would know that. So because it's a really small group of people. So I'm with Mary. I think the sooner you bring somebody on, even if you're not bringing them on full time, even if it's just to do that initial budget so you can shop it around, it's important.
Well, Andy, let's stick with you because I have a question coming up about incentives, but let's go there. Let's talk about the role within a production accountant and incentives, whether it's the local programs here in Florida, whether it's a statewide program or a country program. Talk about the role of the production accountant when it comes to the checks and balances and how you are involved in that incentive process.
Right. So it kind of depends on the studio that you're working for. Some studios have an incentive department who manages it, does the initial submission, and then does the final submission based on the tagging and the reporting that the production accountants do. Sometimes it's the accountant's responsibility to do the submissions and the initial and the final. And sometimes it's the producer's responsibility to do the initial, and then it's the accountant's responsibility to do the final. So it's kind of a big process. I frequently get called for a job and they say, oh, Andy, we have this project. It's going to shoot in, we don't know. It's going to shoot in Florida, Georgia, Mississippi. Can you give us an estimate of the different costs for this? Where they might say, LA, Vancouver, Chicago. So they want to know creatively what works for them, and they want to know what financially works for them. There's a Florida show called Rap Shit that recently shot, and it was Turner. They called me to help them, to advise them. It's a name actress who's executive producer on it, and a very important person to the industry right now. And they said she's interested in shooting in Florida, and I hope we wooed her while she was there. And they said, do an analysis for me of Georgia versus Florida. And then they make a decision, either a business decision or a creative decision to, where they're going to shoot it. In that case, they made this, the cost somehow became cheaper or less of a cost, that savings, to be in Florida.
So they made the correct decision on multiple levels, is what you're saying.
That's right.
There you go.
And I hope it's a huge success. If anybody
and then I'm going to circle back to you about the role of the differences between, making that choice for a production accountant. So like, I know QuickBooks. When invoices come in for Film Florida, I can process them. I can assign them to chart of accounts. I can pay the bills. From an accounting side, is it the volume of transactions that you guys focus on in terms of the assistance that you give for production accountants, or is it the level of detail? Where's your focus from the perspective that you guys come from?
So it's actually just it's very different in many ways. So much like Mary mentioned, it's not corporate accounting, right? You're cost accounting against a budget. So case in point, depending on who you're working with or for, your budget structure by way of chart of accounts, simple things like that vary across the board. Various companies, studios, et cetera, will have different criteria they want to work towards when you're looking to track and manage a project overall. So if you're working in a standard company, you have structured expenses that occur over a period of time, generally speaking, based on the business ebbs and flows. When you're working on film and TV, there's also a general structure where you see costs increase depending on the level of production. So from prep through and then it wraps down as well. However, you're looking to track and manage and maintain a lot of different aspects of information that generally aren't available in a standard accounting system because that's not what it's meant to do. So case in point, incentives are brought up. So if you're filming in different states and tracking these incentives within various states that have incentives, there's various regions within those states or cities, right, where the incentive rates change. Additionally, if you are buying assets for the production that you hope to resell after production, you want to track those as well in a different way. If you're doing different sets and you want to track various locations that you're filming in, if you're tracking episodes, there's so much minutia associated with the job that go above and beyond simply I paid X $100 or Y $200. It's a different dynamic associated with that. Additionally, as Mary mentioned too, is handling the daily AP function is a key portion of this because it also helps for the reporting dynamic when it goes back to the studio or the investor by showing cost reports. In essence, the budget's actual, and you want to make sure this budget actual makes sense. And then it goes down to the latter part of that, which is the payroll portion. So as payroll becomes more and more complex, as union agreements become more and more complex, as the incentive return becomes more and more significant for each production, you've got to track all those dynamics and make sure the reporting represents that as well, right? And then also one of these things that happens all the time is production never, I think it's fair to say, goes literally according to plan because something's going to happen. Weather situation, somebody gets sick, life happens, right? And so these costs keep fluctuating. So, people like Andy and Mary, and there's a couple people on this call too, Leo as well, will go through and have to constantly update the expectations associated with the project, right? Not necessarily budget overages, but just update it. The schedule can change, timing can change, et cetera. And you cannot simply do that in a traditional accounting system. So what a lot of companies do is they use companies like mine or others, and we provide the production accounting aspect to Mary and Andy and others. And then at the end of production, they'll absorb the macro costs into their accounting system, saying that this film or feature cost me X or Y. But the minutia of the data sits within the system on this side.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we couldn't do it without him.
We couldn't do it without him. Yes, you're right.
I don't know what it says about me, but that I actually understand most of what you just explained.
And I just want to say that the payroll company also becomes the reporting entity for all fringes, all employer fringes, all union payments, dues, all of that things. They become the remitting company for that. So it takes it away from the production accounting side, which is another reason why we're less of accountants and more production accountants, because at a normal, if you were working at a Pepsi facility, all of that reporting would be done at the factory level.
That makes sense. Now, Mary, you mentioned that you are focused on feature films. Was that a conscious effort? Is there something different between features and television series that kept you there?
There is a difference. I just got in the feature world and never got out. That's, the relationships I made and the people I worked with. So I just moved along in that world. And like at the studios, they have their film division and they have their TV division. So I don't really know anybody in the TV division. So I just stuck to features. And there is a difference. I mean, Andy can tell you better since he's done TV, but in a feature, it's all one budget and we're tracking the one thing, but the TV has all the episodics. So every week is a separate budget, as well as a big amortization budget that goes over all the shows. I mean, I don't want to get too boring about that, but so there is a difference in how you account for TV and how you feature film.
Andy, take it from
really
there.
It's a matter of worlds. I was in that world.
Right. It's she's right. It's a little bit more complicated in television because each episode is estimated as an individual episode. The studios do it that way in order to control the creative, which they put in lots of checks and balances because it's a very expensive business. And, you know, we all know that when creative goes out of control, it costs a lot of money. So it's features are a director's medium. They green light them based on sales, projected sales, based on that director and the cast that they can bring in. Television, the television model is a viewership model, so it's a fixed price. They make a certain amount of money for that hour of programming, and for that, you know, that spot, and then they have to hit a certain cost for that because they're not really ever going to make that much more money off of it. So you're more locked into the number. There's less flexibility, and they have you track everything by episode in order to limit overages in one episode, or an appetite, a creative appetite, so that one is filled with all blow-ups and then all the other ones are flat because they feel they lose viewership. Television is a producer's medium. The directors float in and out. And besides the pilot, which is where you create kind of the formula, the episode directors really are just following the formula that was originally set.
That makes sense. So audience members, we have quite a few questions in the chat, so I'm gonna keep track of them and try and hit them. But when we get to the audience section, if I miss any, just don't be afraid to raise your hand. If I'm missing them, I'm just gonna do the best I can. We had one that was in the chat, but it also goes towards one of the questions that I asked. Matthew asked, what's the relationship between the production accountant and a line producer? You know, overall, Andy, who does a production accountant work most with during a production?
Well, thanks for asking that question. I think that I forgot to say, and I think Mary forgot to say as well, that when production accountants are hired by studios, that they're one of the few positions that's hired directly by the studio. The studio hires the production accountant, the line producer, the creative person. So you report to the studio because they want to make sure that they have somebody in charge of their financial, has their back for financial reasons. So, and then when you are on the show, you work with the line producer, production manager, and all of the department heads to create the budget and do estimates to help the line producer make decisions, or the director to make decisions to, you give them information so they can make decisions on whether they can afford this, whether they want to do that, whether it's worth it creatively. In television, it's really fun. Mary, you would love it. You should try it. It's very fun because you read the script, and when you have some experience, you're like, oh well, this scene is a waste of time. There's it doesn't drive character, it doesn't drive story. It's a nice scene, but we only have so many minutes, and that scene is very expensive. So you might go to a meeting, you might say, this scene is going to cost you, it's an extra location, it's a stunt, it's a this, it's a that, it's going to cost you $600,000. Are you sure you want to do that? Now, it's not your choice to make, but it's your opportunity to affect the creative as a production accountant, which is nice in a collaborative business. So
I agree with Andy. I work really closely with the producer. Gosh, the last 5-6 years, I've been doing all Adam Sandler's movies because the producer and I work so well together. And he's a particularly tough character in Hollywood, and nobody else wants to work with him. But but we have a really good relationship, and so I feel like we're right up there with the producer, really. And the UPM we're very involved with because they're running the set. But I think for me, my relation, it's also we're on both sides of the fence. I'm working very closely with the finance guy at Netflix, And then I'm working with the producer, and it's a bit of a, make sure that, you're balancing both of those jobs. So.
Emmett, how does somebody find a good production accountant other than watching this and meeting these folks? How does somebody find one?
These days, very, very, very difficultly. It is the production accountants are in very short supply. Good production accountants are in even lesser supply. The reality is it's a very as we mentioned in this call earlier, we've all gotten to this position because of somebody or some happenstance, etc. It's one of these occupations that sadly people haven't sought out in the past, and hopefully that'll change going forward just by way of exposure and education. So the reality is many times I'll get calls, the great majority of times I'll get calls from studios or from line producers who are looking to make X feature or whatever it may be, and they simply need an accountant in a certain location. And then it's incumbent on myself and my team to, in essence, go through our Rolodex, literally just that, and reach out to the Marys, the Andys, and the Leos of the world and say, hey, are you available? Are you interested in this kind of film? And by the way, we'll reach out based on knowing what they've done in the past. So it's a lot. I'm on the sales side of Extreme Reach, and part of that job, if you will, is making sure that I kind of stay in touch with various accountants and line producers, et cetera, over time. To understand what they want, to understand what their needs are, to understand, as Mary just mentioned, do personalities drive? Can you handle jobs of certain budgets? Can you be a good representative of both for all parties involved, right? Because if I recommend an accountant who the producer ends up hating, by default, it comes to me as well, saying, all right, you apparently don't have good taste in accountants, right? So it's this weird balance between you're playing matchmaker, you're playing LinkedIn, you're playing all these things, but you're trying to do it. But the only reality is now it's word of mouth. There is no current formal dynamic associated with finding accounts.
I sure hope more people want to get in this side of the business, because we're also having trouble finding assistant accountants. And it's really a problem right now in the industry. There's such a need for assistant accountants, people becoming production accountants. It's a huge need. And it's really interesting part of the business, because you see everything in the movie. I mean, I know I work with every single department, makeup, wardrobe, everybody. And so it's interesting. People don't realize that. And it's a good stepping stone probably to producing, I would say, also.
Yeah. And in the chat too, there were some comments regarding rates as well. It's a very well-paying occupation as well, as you progress up, and the rates have gotten exponentially better for accountants over time, based on supply, based on need. Especially in this state, we have, as you all know, every possible streaming platform out there, each of which needs content, each of which wants to produce exponential amounts of content. And to produce anything, you need people. And there are only some people out there who can help facilitate and create. So you have rates going out the roof for now, and which is obviously in the benefit of the accountant, and the opportunities are there. And it's not one of the questions regarding a CPA. You don't need a formal CPA, college degree, et cetera. You need to be savvy in numbers, don't get me wrong, but it's not a formal education mandate dynamic, but it is something where hours, knowledge, or just the ability to want to learn more than just what you're doing. Because as both Mary and Andy mentioned, is you work with the entire production. And if you don't understand what it needs to, if you're reading something on paper and you go, that's going to result in X on screen, what is it going to take to make that happen? I need to account for, when I'm budgeting, I got to account for X, equipment, individuals, et cetera, because you have a general knowledge of what it takes to put what's on paper on screen. And these things become skill over time. So right now, it's a mentorship dynamic. It's finding somebody who wants to mentor you, and you being a good mentee.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's talk a hypothetical based on that situation. Let's say there's somebody in the audience right now that's in the industry, but they really like the financial side, the number side of things, and think, you know what, maybe I should kind of go this path. How does somebody become an assistant or a junior to kind of get their feet wet and hopefully get to a place where any of you guys are at? Andy?
They should send me an email immediately to
Okay.
andysbox@aol.com. It's really a networking responsibility. I think it's funny that Mary says that if the film commission helped her, I actually did the same thing. I went through the film commissions. They're great. The film commissioners are great resources. When I started, I would fax my resume to the film commissioners and then call them. It was, the 90s, so it was pre-internet. But they're a great resource. The payroll companies are a great resource. They're always collecting
Yeah.
resumes. There's a email blast called Emily Rice that blasts out accountants who are desperate to find someone, put listings on Emily Rice, and it gets emailed out once a week to all of the people that are registered. The studios have Facebook pages that they're looking for people. There's a tremendous need. I've been asked by studios to give classes. Mary Stuart Masterson has a not-for-profit in Hudson Valley of New York. I gave a class there, like a 10-hour class to recruit production accountants. I hired a couple of them out of that, put them on shows. A couple other ones got jobs. There's a enormous need. And from me talking to this, because we're close to the studios, it is amazing, particularly in the unscripted world, the amount of work that's about to come in 2023. We are about to be in a huge amount of trouble with the amount of work that's going to exist. So scripted is going to be downsized a little bit.
Yeah, come on, everybody, become production accountants.
Become
There
production
you go.
accountants. That's right. Send me your resume now. I'm in Fort Lauderdale.
There you go.
But you could work from home, maybe.
Oh, the fun part's going on location.
I agree. The fun part is I think that the fun part is being on the shows. But recently, I'm working with Adept Productions in Fort Lauderdale to create a production service company, and I'm building out a team of production accountants for FX to work around the country. So I'm going less to shows. Like you're full-time on a show, Mary, in Paris. I'm jealous. I'm doing a show in Chicago, a show in New York, a show in a show in New Jersey, and I'm traveling to them two times a month to each of them to supervise, and I have like a mini staff there that's kind of doing the bookkeeping and paying the bills. So
Good. So if everybody hasn't noticed, I've gone into the chat and starting to ask those questions. But if somebody does want to raise their hand and ask their question on camera, just go ahead and use that hand raising function. We'll get people lined up. But in the meantime, I'm going to keep asking. So Leo asked a long question, but essentially talking about work conditions, specifically, with COVID, work conditions had to change across the board. But from a production accounting standpoint, team, are work conditions better, through COVID? And do you think this is going to continue, or over time is this going to kind of go back to? I guess the implication is work conditions are not great for the production team or for the accounting team. But do you think things will improve as they have with some other things?
I hope so. No, I mean, for me, just getting off this Netflix show, basically the biggest difference is having to wear masks in the office. We were getting tested 2-3 times a week, depending if you're going to go to set or not. People that are on set get tested, I think, almost every day for Netflix shows. And it also changes how we have to account for all these COVID costs and everything. So COVID's been a real drag for me personally as the accountant, but I'm hoping it lightens up. I mean, but so far it hasn't really. They're still testing and
the white pages are still there, and
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to change. I don't think it's going to change. The asset, the stars are too much of an asset for the studios and networks. And and I have to say their commitment is huge. I don't know if they're getting subsidized by the government, but a show could be $10 million for one show.
Hey, our
COVID.
COVID budget on Murder Mystery 2 was $10 million,
Yeah.
just
so,
for COVID costs.
yeah, just same for only murders ish.
Yeah.
It's a tremendous amount of money that they're spending, committing to it. And even a little show, I'm doing a tier 1 movie in Chicago called We've Grown Now. And I think we have almost $900,000 in COVID costs. So
Yeah.
it's a
Wow.
big spend. It's a big spend.
Wow.
Here's the worst thing about the COVID protocols. We can't have rap parties anymore.
Except for I just had one of my shows just had one of my shows.
Oh,
just had-
lucky.
so
Maybe-
you missed out in Paris.
Yeah.
You gotta have
Hopefully
them,
we'll
you gotta
get
have them
back to
outdoors.
that.
You gotta have them outdoors, I guess. It's too cold.
That's
in
Yeah.
right.
Paris right now.
That's
Yeah.
the one thing I miss the most.
Yeah.
because of COVID.
Here's another question from the chat, and then we're gonna jump over to Leo because he raised his hand. Do production accountants ever get involved in financing or finding financing for a project?
I don't.
No?
Yeah,
They could, but
they could, but they don't really. They
that's a
don't.
producer job.
Right.
Well, that I think, people that are looking for funding, they want everybody to help them because it's the question I get most in my role is how can I find funding for my project? And my answer is always the same. I promise that if I had the answer to that question, I would not be in this role. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, funding's to your point, it's always the thing everybody needs as well, not just wants. But it's one of these dynamics where everybody gets everybody's trying to find money wherever they can. It's out there to some level, but never easy to find. There are companies that, like, I work with various companies to assist. One of the things that happens now when I get involved is when you're financing against an incentive. So when you hand the incentive there, people want to lend against incentive so they can put that money into production now. Those kind of things, I could point people in the right direction to support that dynamic. But first money in or last money in, that like true financing, especially without the collateral incentive, that's always a fun one because, like everything else, is relationship based. Can this person actually do what they say they can do with the script?
That's right.
And do I trust them enough to make that happen? So it's
Right.
That's
I
sadly
will-
it's one of these things. When you've done it once, you can do it 50 times, but you got to do it once first, and that's our
Right.
all right, Leo, I am gonna add the spotlight so everybody can see you and go ahead and ask your question.
Sure. Hey, good morning, everybody. And thanks, John, for putting this panel together. It's awesome. It's good to see you as well, Amit. It's been a while, buddy. Kind of as a continuation of my original question, I've worked as a production accountant, all aspects of production accounting, and now as the lead in a pretty major independent. One of the things I've seen come out of COVID is people seeing the true worth of the production accountant, the payroll accountant, et cetera, right? I think, why it's taken this long to go, wait a minute, how are we going to pay people when we don't have the team to do it, especially over COVID, kind of really came to the forefront. And I've seen rates increase. I've seen people demanding and getting better working conditions. And, I've always seen that as, the production management team and the production accounting team are really doing one and the same job with slightly different viewpoints. You've got the logistical aspect and you've got the finance aspect, but they're really on a parallel. The big difference has been the rates that the PM teams get versus the production accounting people. And I think that they've reached a level now where they're on parity with each other, which is justified and something I fully support. Do you think this is just a short-term blip, call it a blip, but a good blip, while the industry resets itself? Or do you think it's going to be something that's going to carry on momentum for the future and many more years to come?
I think once you get a high rate, that's your rate and you're not going to go backwards and they'll pay it. I feel like over the years, my rate's gone up incrementally. And yes, over COVID, it did go up a lot more or, other factors also. But I don't see it going backwards. And I know the unions are getting I know that 161, the accounting union in New York, in the East Coast, has been really strong about the rates. And they've done a good job at setting some rates, and those are continuing to increase. So they won't have a choice. They can't go back.
Thank you, Mary. I created those rates. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
You're
Although I'm not
welcome.
in the union.
I agree with you on the accountant rate. I think that there could be evolution in the assistants, because I think that some of the work can be brought back into the studio, and there's already a trend for prep and wrap accounting to be, they're growing people at the studios. So there might be a reduction, but during the force of production, you always have to have people. And technology is helping us a lot. Thank God for the paperless accounting, and all the departments are tracking their expenses in a much more efficient way. It's a little different for a production accountant, because although crew loves the P card, loves the credit card, it actually creates problems on the studio side because the cash spend is faster. So they have a faster cash burn. And what people don't know is that lots of shows are bank loaned, even though you might not see it as part of your budget. At the studio level, they've taken out a bank loan to finance it, and they're incurring interest costs. So they're very concerned about the spend and the cash flow and how we burn the money.
Okay.
Boring.
No,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep, I was on mute. Sorry about that. All right, Ram, I'm gonna unmute, or I'm gonna spotlight you, bring you down, and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Great, thanks. This is great. I just learned about this meeting a few days ago. I'm a filmmaker now. I'm kind of semi-retired. I used to be a CPA, internal audit director for Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 companies for several decades. And I kind of retired from that, following my passions. And this is really interesting with production accounting. Where does somebody like me go to learn how to use my inherent skills and just learn how to apply it to production accounting for films? I mean, I'm assuming there's resources. I started Googling stuff, but I figured you guys may just point me in the right direction. And also with the production accounting, can you do that remotely these days, or do you have to be on set? And is it a like 10-hour type days like most crews? I know it's a lot of questions. I'm sorry, but this is very interesting.
There's a lot of questions. I know they have support some good boot camps and things for payroll accounting. But I feel like for production accounting, it's a matter of just getting a job on a movie as an assistant and learning from the ground up. I mean, you have to learn about, oh, how does this work? Oh, they got purchase orders, and how does a petty cash system work? And it's really just jumping in and starting as an assistant and getting trained and, learning as you go. And then maybe you could get on a smaller movie as an accountant, like how I started, and just go from there. But you know what? I feel like they do need to have more resources in training accountants. Maybe that could be my retirement thing.
There you go.
Yeah, sounds
Well,
good.
do you guys mentor people now? I mean, if people come to you specifically and said, I want to learn the ropes, and do you guys help them out? Have you had the opportunity to do that? Or are you too busy with regular projects?
My first assistant will do that.
Okay.
I've hired people as clerks on a movie, because they wanted to get in on the show. But actually, as the accountant, I let my first assistant pretty much runs the rest of the department and the accounting crew. I'm too busy with the
Yeah.
big boys.
Yeah. So how about a little story time? Andy, do you have any weird stories from the production accounting days, the world?
You asked us about this, so we would be prepped. So, I love what I do. But there's not a lot of fun stories. I will say, because there's like accounting nerd stuff. So I did Revolutionary Road, and it was supposed to be this very sweet, well, if you've seen the movie, it's not really sweet, but it's supposed to be an independent movie that was with Kate Winslet, and we were shooting it in New York, and it was lovely. And then and Kate was married to the director, and all of a sudden Leo signed on, and of course the budget went up from the $15 million movie or whatever to a $35 million movie. So because your footprint just expands as the stars come on. And so we were on week 4 of 8 of prep, and we had to move the entire show to Connecticut in order to chase an incentive to in order to afford to have Leo on the show. So and all of those decisions are financially based. I mean, it's like accounting nerd stuff, but you say, oh, what happens if we get Leo? How much more will they make in sales? How much, how much do they care about that creatively? And then do they care about it $5 million creatively? Do they care about it $10 million? And of course, nobody tells you. You kind of like try to get them to give the number, but they really want you to say, we'll make it for $20 million, or we'll make it for $15 million. So, and I was like Mary on a show called My Blueberry Nights with Wong Kar-wai. Wong Kar-wai, he creates as he goes. So he'll shoot in one city, and then he'll decide when you're shooting in another city that he wants to do something different with the characters in the first city. So then you're going to go back to that city. But when you do your initial budget, you only plan on going in the city once, and then going to another city and shooting in that city, and then going to a third city and shooting in that city, and so on. So you're constantly rebudgeting, and it's fun for me because it's, that's what I do. It's part of my passion. And so it's interesting because as the creative is evolving, you have to evolve the budget, and then it becomes, the platter of you can have this and this, or this and this, or you can go and raise $5 million more. Yeah. And it becomes an adult business discussion, which is really great because you don't really think of that happening in the film business.
Yeah. Just a reminder, if anybody has questions, go ahead and raise your hand because we're kind of winding down a little bit. Mary, fun stories.
Well, I got a million fun stories, a million from all that going on location. I mean, I remember, yeah, the accounting stuff, every single movie has odd things. I mean, how else would I know the Coen brothers' favorite cookies to have for craft service, But I remember one time actually thinking, this is really odd. I was working on a movie in Argentina that Francis Ford Coppola's company, American Zoetrope, was producing. And he came down to visit the set. And for some reason, he decided he was going to hang out with me and my assistant, Spring, you know her, Andy. We actually ended up going to a soccer match and I remember sitting in that stadium in Argentina next to Francis Ford Coppola, thinking, I'm sitting in a soccer. Well, this is pretty odd. Things like that, or like, working on There Will Be Blood, and Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Thomas Anderson know about this romance I'm having on set and are like jiving me about it. Or, it's just like unusual, just the things you're thrown into and the things you're doing. All the interesting stuff just happens, while you're on location, and the job itself is super interesting, and the accounting stuff could be odd and unusual, but it's the experiences and the travel and the people you get to know. I mean, it's just really kind of magical, to tell you the truth.
It is.
Any fun stories?
Mary,
Sorry, go ahead, Andy.
And Mary, were there machine guns as protection in Argentina?
No, I only saw machine guns when I was in Panama.
Yeah, we had them in Cambodia. It was a little shocking the first time I saw it. Yeah. So I had it in Mexico City, but in like 2000. So
yeah, scary.
Yeah. And Emmett, good stories from your time?
I've had similar stories, but more than that, mine was actually just transitioning from corporate finance to this world where I remember going from an interview, I got an interview to be a clerk. And in my mind, I'm an MBA. I have I have a degree, worked in corporate accounting for years. And all right, what's up? And then I come into the interview wearing a suit. Totally necessary. Totally ridiculous.
They probably laughed at
Oh,
you.
it was.
They probably did. I do.
Man, I got clowned on for weeks, legit. I think I think I've ever put that suit on again, period. Actually, this is a rule of life since then. But turns out you didn't need that. But then also it was humbling. It was one of these things where I came in thinking I knew everything, or thinking I knew a lot, I should say, not everything, but I knew a lot. And I did know a lot, just didn't know a lot about this. And so you kind of got to get your feet dirty, et cetera, and get into it. And then it was just, learning simple things like being on location, eating craft services, and then working on set and not getting crafty. And you're like, damn it, that changes the whole concept is different now. And just little things like that. But just finding out that whatever you thought you knew, you don't until you actually get in there and do some stuff. So there's a lot of courses, a lot of training we've talked about and stuff like that. Many of the production account payroll companies, mine included, will do demos so at least people can understand the software dynamic first. Well, not first, but just to get a frame of what's going on. And that's free to anybody to kind of jump in, and on any of the company websites, you'll find these things. So, take a look at some of that stuff. That at least give you an insight of what the software can do. And maybe that kind of opens your eyes up a little bit. So when you have conversations or when you get on set, one thing is every accountant's going to have a choice or a preference of what they like to work with or how. And just gives you a little leg up on that sense. But then it's going to be getting out there and doing it. But don't wear a suit.
All right, question from the audience. We got Jumming, so I'm going to add the spotlight and go ahead and take yourself off of mute and go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, yeah, so thank you guys again for having us today. That's really informative information. I have a question though from almost from a independent small company's point of view. Like I hear the importance of production accounting and things of that nature, but how does that actually play an effect on a smaller production company that we didn't really discuss exactly how much a production accountant is actually paid? So it doesn't sound like it's something that may be within a small independent film production company's budget. How would you approach that? And is it necessary to have a production accountant, or would a CPA suffice for maybe in the meantime for a smaller film production company?
You better speak about that, Andy, because I only know the
The
studio
big
stuff.
leagues. So you're making movies, right? Okay, so when you have a completed script, you need to find a production accountant to read your script and advise you. You need to have a conversation about how big of a movie you want to make, what kind of stars you want in it, and then you should discuss creating a budget to go out and sell that. Because when you talk to investors, when you talk to distributors, you need to know how much money it's going to cost, right? So, and then you need to know what you can afford in order to cast it. So that is going to cost you $2,500 to $7,500. Maybe it'll be free to start with for your first conversation, but by the time they're doing a budget, it's going to cost you $2,500 to $7,500. If they like your script, they will continue to play with you while you're developing it. So, because you're going to have to shop that script to get cast attached, or you're going to have to get a financier, and you're going to have to cast based on whatever amount of money you get. If you're making $150,000 movie, you're probably not going to hire a production accountant. You're probably going to try to do it yourself. Hire a consultant to help you. Say, hey, can you, or a post-production accounting company who is interested in doing some small jobs. So somebody to support you. You don't need somebody on staff, but you need somebody to help advise you so that you actually have something to sell. So many people call and say, I have this project, here's my script. Well, that's not enough. no studio is going to buy it based on that, unless you're friends with the head of creative at Netflix. You know what I mean? Or any of the studios, which is unlikely. You know? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think pretty deep. So in my mind, the way I look at it is $7,500 is typically a lot, especially starting out for somebody like me. So I'm the type of person where, like, that experience that was mentioned earlier, I'm the type of person I would rather go in there and learn the experience and still be able to kind of go in there and do like my own kind of thing on the side where I'm still like learning it. As far as a CPA, is it necessary to have a CPA for the film production if you have a production accountant on your team?
No.
No.
It's not necessary because they'll be able to handle all of.
They'll handle everything, and then you have a tax accountant at the end of the year. That'll be an
Say
extra
again?
accountant.
I didn't hear that.
There will be an extra accountant to do your taxes at the end of the year, but your production accountant can do everything else.
But also, as far as rates for a production accountant, I mean, I started out the new production accountants aren't going to be asking for the kind of rates that are, happening now. So you could probably find somebody that has enough knowledge that, might be new too, that might not be as expensive for you.
Well,
I'm
Mary,
guessing.
do
I
production
just know
accountants
I
work?
did it when I was.
I know we all did it. We all did.
Yeah.
You worked for $250 because that's what you did.
Yeah, yeah.
But that was a
Mary,
long time ago.
do production accountants work on flat rates? Do they work on day rates? What do those range? Just
Well,
give
we
people a
get
sense
weekly
overall.
rate. Well, I don't know, different. I know the East Coast Union, there's hourly, but they're guaranteed certain hours. My union, we're on weekly rates. So we get paid our weekly rate. So not hourly, it's flat.
Right.
Um,
I don't mind saying it, Mary. So assistants make 40,000 to 100,000. Accountants make
What do you mean?
50,000 to, for a year, for
a year.
For accountants make 50,000 to 400,000. For a weekly, assistants can make 750 to 23,000, and accountants can make 15 to I don't know, it's 9,000.
Mine's a bit high, Andy.
I know, but it's not typical. It's not typical. Can you believe that? But there's a list of what other people are making. I was shocked to see somebody with 9,000 because I'm not making 9,000. So, but it lands like the union structure makes it land around 5 per week right now for an accountant, and people negotiate over scale, and if you are on a tier on a lower budget project, it's about 2 on a tier 1 for an account. So I don't know if that helps people, but it gives you kind of a thinking range of what does it cost.
Right. Okay. Marilyn, we're going to come to you in just a second, but before we do that, I'm going to give everybody an opportunity on our panel to plug whatever they need to plug. A website, give out your email address, give out your company, give out projects that you want to talk about, anything you want. Emmett, you go first.
I actually, in the chat, I put my LinkedIn in there. Feel free to just go ahead on there. My company information is on there. ExtremeReach.com is the payroll company I represent. And my information is in there as well. So it's a decent way to contact me if you have any questions regarding anything we're doing. Me personally, I'm trying to figure out ways to do more production in Florida, which we don't see much of. One, because I moved back there and I'd like to stay there. I'm currently in LA, so it's a little early for me, but it's I'm here because you got to come back here for meetings pretty frequently. And between here in New York and Toronto and Canada in general, I'm just kind of all over. But if we could do work in Miami or Florida in general, that would be awesome in a selfish nature. So happy to connect. Feel free to reach out to me there and we'll take it from there.
Great. Andy?
If you want to be an assistant accountant, send me your resume. to andysbox at AOL.com. I'm very busy building stuff, a lot of building more assistants for studios there. They've asked me to do it. I'm trying to do it. I have funding to do it. I have the green light to grow people. And I also said that I'm in the final stages of launching a production service company in Florida. There are a number of out-of-country productions that are coming to the United States. One of the destinations is Florida, which is awesome. And we need to have legitimate companies set up. We need to have crew that can be hired through them and union contracts. So I'm doing that. It's called Depth Productions. I have nothing else to plug. No, I think production accountants really important. It's an important missed part of the industry. So, read about it a little bit and understand how it can help you. If you, send me an email and say, this is my situation. How can it help you? I'm very busy and it might take me 2 weeks to respond and it might only be 4 sentences long, but I'm happy to respond to everybody and work with your film commissioners because they can help to build training programs. They can help to build organizations that can give classes on Mary would be happy to come in and tell you about production accounting and give you more detail of how to read a contract. I hope.
That's right. Sure, I'll tell you whatever.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's all I have.
I got nothing to plug. No, I was like, I'm mostly saying no to people because I'm trying to retire actually after all this. It's after 28 years. I think I'm gonna slow down and who knows what the next chapter is. I maybe it is helping people learn about production accounting. I'll be more involved with Film Florida, whatever you guys need. So if anybody can think of something cool for me to do, just let me know. But
Excellent. All right, Marilyn, I'm going to spotlight you and bring you down. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
My question, good morning. I love this session about documentaries. Do you do much on accounting for documentaries or what would you recommend? So I'm currently putting one together and I definitely need to get some numbers. So what would you recommend for me? Do I need a production accountant for this project?
I don't know anything about documentaries.
Well, what are you making it and then trying to sell it, or are you funded by somebody to make it? Is it done through a not-for-profit? How are you doing it?
I'm making it, and then but I need to. I'm trying to come up with a budget so I'll know how much I need to pay people and so forth to get it done. Got it.
So yes, I think it's important to have a budget. Documentaries there are production accountants that do them. They're very long sometimes. I worked at National Geographic TV for a while. So when I left there, I worked with a bunch of filmmakers who were making docs. And the schedule's really long because it takes a long time to get all of your interviews. And then the cutting process is long. And usually there's you have to go to wherever to get the footage or whatever. So it's important to take each day, each little unit, like this interview and that little interview, and then kind of group them together and say that each one is going to cost $500 to figure out how much it's going to cost you in the end. And then you can jiggle it and say, well, I guess I don't have to spend $200 on this. I'll spend $100 on this. You know what I mean? Send me an email and I'll send you something to help you.
Andy, would she just hire somebody to do a budget for her and then
She could. Yeah.
I did that for Dave Bushell. Remember our buddy?
Oh yeah.
He's doing a documentary about Cheech and Chong.
Oh, how funny. Oh, that's funny. Of course he is. Of course he is.
So she could just get a budget done at the beginning and then,
Yeah. I think that Howard Gertler can give me a budget template.
yeah.
That's what I
Okay,
told
thank
her.
you.
Send me a note. You're welcome.
All right, so that's going to wrap up another edition of Film Florida Friday. Thanks to Andy, Mary, and Emmett for being with us, and thanks to all of you in the audience. We'll be back next month. We're tentatively scheduled for Friday, May 13th, with a great edition of Film Florida Friday talking about on-camera talent and casting. The registration link is in the chat box, and you'll also see that through some email blasts and social media soon. I want to thank all of our Film Florida members for their continued support, especially of Film Florida Friday. If you're not already a member of Film Florida, we hope you'll consider joining at filmflorida.org. If you enjoy Film Florida Fridays, consider donating the $20.22 for our 2022 fundraising campaign. You can find that link in our chat box and on the website. Keep up with everything we're doing on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And finally, check out the Film Florida podcast on Apple, Google, Stitcher, and the iHeartRadio app. Thanks again for being here, everybody. Stay safe and healthy. And there's a lot of information in the chat box, so we're going to leave the recording up for a little bit of time, so everybody can kind of scroll through that. So once we log out, obviously it goes away. So make sure if you want to stick around, you can, and just go through that chat box and grab some notes from there. But thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.
So nice to see you guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
John.
Accounting's cool.
Cool.